Hi, I'm Christina, and this is a book review of Burial Rites by Hannah Kent. So this is her debut novel and it was published in 2013. The reason I've picked this up is because I read Devotion by her last year and I absolutely loved it. I gave it 5 stars and it's one of my best books of the year. So I've decided I want to read more books by the authors that I've absolutely loved a book by, and I thought I'm going to go back and read her debut novel, which is this one. And this is a historical fiction novel and it's also a literary fiction novel. So this is set in Iceland and it's set in the year 1829 and it's set in Northern Iceland specifically. So our main character is called Agnes and she has been accused and convicted of the murders of 2 people, 2 men. And 3 people in total have been convicted of the murders and they have all been sentenced to execution. Now, this is actually a story that's based on true events. So Agnes is a real person and she was convicted of the murders of 2 men and she was sentenced to death and she was the last person to be executed in Iceland. So it is based on a real story and it's based on a real event and she is a real person, but there is very, very little known about this woman. So you can tell that Hannah Kent has done a lot of research about this case in particular, about Iceland in the 1800s. And it's really interesting that it's actually based on something that genuinely happened, but a lot of the story itself is something that she has written, so that is fictional, and she's trying to give a backstory to a person of history where not very much is known about them. I think all they really know is her name and that she was a servant, and the people that she was accused of killing, and the fact that she was the last person to be executed in Iceland. So it's really, really interesting that she's chosen to give a voice to someone who in history doesn't really have a voice, but obviously the event itself is real, but the story that she constructs is fiction. Now, I really, really enjoyed it. I am giving this one 5 stars too. I do think that I prefer Devotion a little bit. That was one of my best books of 2024, but also one of my favourite books of all time now. It's one of my favourite historical fiction reads of all time and genuinely one of my favourite books of all time. And I really, really enjoyed this. Definitely worthy of 5 stars, but I didn't enjoy it quite as much. So the other one is about 2 girls who are quite young and they build this lovely friendship and then it blossoms into love, and it's just this lovely sapphic love story which I really enjoyed, and that is set in Prussia, which is now modern day Poland, and that was set I think also around the 1800s. So she definitely writes historical fiction very well, and you can tell that she has researched this place and this person very well. And there is some information in the back that she tells you about. There's an author's note and you can read all about it, and it's very, very interesting. And yeah, I just really, really enjoyed this. And I know very little about Iceland in the 1800s. It is a time in history and a place in history that I don't know much about at all. So it was very, very interesting to learn about. And I think she's really, really good at painting the picture of Iceland. She writes beautifully, as she did in Devotion. And I really do like the way that she writes. She's very descriptive and you can imagine yourself in Iceland. Now, I've never been to Iceland myself, but it is somewhere I definitely want to go. I would love to go one day. And she really does paint Iceland in a brilliant way. It feels very real and it's a very difficult time to live for the people that we see. So it feels just very cold and very dark and very bleak and just a very difficult time to be alive. So to go back to the actual story, our main character is called Agnes, but we do see from other people's perspectives too. So essentially, she has been accused and convicted of the murder of these 2 men. And what would normally happen is you would send your person to be executed to Denmark and probably execute them in Copenhagen, for example. But they've decided, the district commissioner has decided that he wants to make an example of this. And this was a horrendous, horrific murder. It was very bloody, very gruesome, and everybody in the local area is aware of it. Everybody's talked about it. It's big news. Everybody knows about this. So he wants to make an example of these people and basically show that if you do wrong in Northern Iceland, you will be punished. And I think he's also concerned that this terrible, atrocious thing has happened, and he's trying to prevent more horrendous crime in the future. And his way in doing that is to set an example now that this will absolutely not be tolerated, and there will be real consequences that everybody will see. So what they decide to do is send her to a family to kind of look after her. So they don't really have anywhere to imprison her or the other two people. So the idea is some Christian family with an obligation to the state will take these criminals in and house them and kind of not look after them, but will, you know, observe them and feed them and clothe them and basically look after them, but, you know, not in a nice way. So our main characters as well is this family, and the father is kind of somewhat political, and he is expected as a good Christian man with his family to look after this woman until she is sentenced to death. So at some stage they get a date of execution, and we are basically just working our way towards the date of execution. We're following her through the months and the weeks and the days and the moments before the end of her life. And I really enjoyed the family too. We have a mother who is struggling with health conditions. She's coughing a lot. She coughs up a lot of blood, and she's not in a good way, and she probably is dying. She probably is dying. And she has two daughters who are very different. One of them is quite fond of Agnes, and she's trying to build kind of friendship between her, but obviously this woman is a convicted criminal, a convicted murderer. And then we have the father, who isn't always there because he's away doing business, and we have the other sister who doesn't like her at all and doesn't want to get to know her in the slightest. So obviously when this family is told that they're going to have to house this convicted murderer, they are dead set against it, understandably. But the father basically explains to his wife that this is expected of them. So this is obviously what they're going to do. And obviously in the beginning, she's just this massive inconvenience and this massive threat and danger to the family, and the mother in particular was very, very, very unhappy and very concerned about the safety of her daughters, the safety of herself, the safety of her other servants, the safety of her husband, understandably. But then over time you start to see kind of relationships building and people talking to one another, and maybe seeing that everything they thought about this woman might not necessarily be true. And another important character in the story is a vicar that is sent to her. So essentially, as part of the burial rites, you are allowed someone to guide you in a religious way, and you are allowed to choose that person if you would like to. And she had a very fleeting interaction with this man years ago. I think he helped her cross a river, so she chose him to guide her. And the idea is this vicar will guide you towards your execution and guide you towards your death, and kind of make peace with God and repent on your horrendous actions and your crimes. And yeah, I really, really enjoyed it. It was excellent. Yeah, there's some really interesting characters in here, interesting dynamics. And it's just a really, really interesting part of history. And like I say, it's something I've never known very much about. I don't think I've ever read a book set in Iceland in the 1800s. And very interesting to centralise on a character that is the last person to be executed in Iceland. And really nice that she has given a voice to a real woman, a real person that lived. And we know so very, very little about her. And to just kind of give a voice to that story that someone's kind of been lost in history. So yeah, really enjoyed it, would highly recommend it. It is beautifully written. devotion is also beautifully written. And I am definitely going to read her other book, which I believe is called The Good People, and yeah, really like it, really like her writing. Hannah Kent is very possibly going to become one of my favourite authors, and I am planning to read everything that she writes. I do really, really like her writing style and the way that she writes, and really interesting that she picks just pieces and time in history and places that I don't know very much about, because I didn't know much about Prussia in the 1800s either. So yeah, great, really enjoyed it. Highly recommend it. 5 stars. If you have read it, I would love to know what you thought of it. If you've read any of her other books, definitely let me know what you thought of those too. And if I've convinced you to read it and you decide to, definitely come back and let me know what you think of it once you've read it. So thank you so much for watching. Please do like the video if you've liked it, and please do subscribe if you'd like to hear more of me talking about books. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.